Hey guys, this is Anthony Morganti from AnthonyMorganti.com. This is episode 4 of Learn Topaz. And in this episode, I decided we're going to do Adjust 5. And the reason why I chose to do Adjust 5 now is that I noticed that Topaz Labs currently has it on sale. So if you like what you see in this video, you could save a few dollars if you purchase it before the end of the month. That would be before the end of July 2015. Now, with that said, let me state that I do not have any affiliation with Topaz Labs and they're not paying me to do these videos. I'm merely doing the videos for our own edification. Okay, now in previous videos, I used these plugins as plugins in Lightroom. And I mentioned in the last video that in this video, I would using this plugin as a plugin in Photoshop. Now, one caveat, when you use any plugins in Photoshop, particularly the Topaz Labs plugins, you shouldn't just apply them, in my case here, to the background image. Or if you did a bunch of Photoshop work and you have a bunch of layers over here in your layers panel, you shouldn't just apply a plugin all of a sudden. You should apply it to a merged layer. So if you have a bunch of layers, create a merged layer, then apply a plugin. If you have a single layer like I do here, duplicate your layer, then apply the plugin. The reason being is that the plugin is going to be applied directly to the top layer. If down the road I decide I don't like what I did with the plugin, I could undo it by just simply throwing away that top layer. So let me demonstrate. We have Photoshop CC 2015 here. These plugins work the same exact way in CC 2014, CC, CS6, CS5. It might even work in prior versions, I'm not sure, but I know they'll work from CS5 on up. I want to duplicate this background layer. I have a Mac, I hit Command J. Here, let me do that. I will hit Command J. If you have a PC, you'd hit Control J. Now, the plugin is going to be applied to what's called layer 1 right now. A week from now, a year from now, if I don't like it, I just throw this in the garbage and I'm right back to where I started. So again, we'll hit Command J to create this background layer. Now I want to run the plugin. Real easy to do in Photoshop. Go up to Filter, Topaz Labs, Topaz Adjust 5, and it will open up the image in Topaz Labs Adjust 5. One thing about Adjust 5, and it's like this with most of the Topaz plugins, they have what they call sticky adjustments, meaning whatever I did in a previous image will automatically be applied to the next image I load into it. And you could see that it applied a plugin or applied some settings, to this image already. I may not want that. So what we'll do is we'll hit reset over here in the right panel. And this will bring us to the original image that was in Photoshop. So I'm going to give you a brief tour of the workspace, and it's very similar to all Topaz products. So if you're used to one, you're used to them all. On the left-hand panel, we have collections and presets. The presets are kept in collections. The collections are kind of like the folder for the presets. And Adjust 5 has a lot of different presets and a lot of different collections. We have this Adjust 4 preset list. This is presets that were available in the previous version of Adjust 4 in this case, and they keep them all together in that collection. We have a classic collection, a film collection, and so on, as you could see. You could also create your own presets and save them in My Collection. You also could export your presets and give them to someone, or someone could export presets they created and give them to you, and you could load them into Topaz Adjust. And the way you would do that is down here in this lower left hand corner, there's a little gear. And you click on that, and you could see save means you're creating your own preset. So you did a bunch of adjustments, you like what you did, you could create a preset by clicking save. And I'll do that later. You could delete a preset if you created one and you didn't like it. Later on, you could just delete it. And you could import, export presets as I mentioned. Snapshots. When you're working, let's say you adjusted and you kind of like it, but you go, well, I'd like to see what it looks like if I do it this. Well, if you do all that and you don't like it, you have to kind of backtrack to where you were. What you could do is you could create a pre or a snapshot, then do all those other adjustments. And, a half hour later, if you did all those adjustments and you didn't like where you're going with it, just go back to your snapshot and you could return to the image where it was. And I'm going to show that in more detail in a minute. But let's talk more about these presets and how I use Topaz Adjust. And I think most photographers do it the same way as I do. Usually, I will do one of two things. I will come in here and just pick a preset that I know I like and I'm done. I do that probably 20% of the time. The rest of the time I'll come in here and I'll get a preset that gets me close to something I like. Then I'll go over to the right hand panel and I'll further adjust the image and touch it up to get it to exactly like I want it. I do that probably 80% of the time. Now, one thing I often do, and one preset I specifically like a lot, is one called Photo Pop. It's available in this classic collection, and you could see as I hover over the presets, a preview will pop up showing my image with the preset applied. And as I go down, you could see I could just look at each of the presets. And as I did that, you could see that this little kind of circle forms. And that means that Topaz has created the, the preview for me. That's all that means. So you go through and we could see, and there's Photo Pop. That is the one I usually like. I like that one a lot. Now, if you don't like scrolling and hovering like this to look at all the different presets in a preview window, you want to compare the presets maybe next to one another, click this box right here and you'll come up with this grid pattern. Now, depending on how fast your computer is, how powerful it is, this may take a while to render, but then you could see all the presets side by side and decide whether you like high key 1 better, high key 2 better, or whatever. And you could just go through them like this. If you want to see the original image next to these, you could click right here. And you could see we see the original image. Now, I accidentally applied a preset. So I'm going to go back here. I want to apply Photo Pop, right? So we're just going to click there, and there it applied Photo Pop to the image. Now, if you want to see the original image, there's a few different ways to do that. You click right here, and you'll toggle before, that's the original image, and after, and that's the image with Photo Pop applied to it. I also could just click the left mouse button in and hold it in, and you could see there's the original, let go, there's the processed. I could hold in the space bar, there's the original, let go, there's the processed. And finally, there's a little box right here. I could click on that and I'll get a side-by-side view of the original next to the processed image. I also could hit this little magnifying uh, tool here, and I will, in this case, zoom out and I could see them full size or fit to fill to see each of the original and the processed image, and I could dial in different value if I so choose. So we're going to get rid of that. We're going to go back to the workspace that has the single processed view like that. So we click that box right there. And again, these work the same way. You could zoom in by any of these. Typically I use it and I just keep it on fit. The other thing over here is we have this little light bulb, and what that does is change the color of this border. And you just keep clicking it and it will toggle through different shades of gray pretty much and just get it to where you like. You could close down the side panels by clicking on these arrows if you want a little more workspace to see what you're doing. And that is pretty much all the controls in the center. Now, as I mentioned, sometimes you might want to add a snapshot to this image or to the settings that you're doing. And right here, if I click right here, and I created a snapshot. Now what that means, if I go over on this right panel and I start adjusting things and I get to a point where I don't like it, I could go back to this point by clicking right there. It's kind of like a preset, but it's temporary. It's only good for this session. When I close Topaz down, even if I reopen this image in Topaz, it's going to be gone. It won't be there anymore. So if I want something more permanent, I'll have to create a preset. Now this was the Photo Pop preset, so I'm just going to move some things around here real quick. All right, I made just some slight adjustments to the sliders here. So I want to create a preset of this image. So we're going to go down here to this bottom gear and we're going to go save. And we'll come up with this and we give the preset a name and I'm going to call it Tony's Photo Pop. And it's created by Tony. And you could give it a description if you like, you know, dramatic clouds or something that might jog your memory so you remember what it does, but it's not really needed in keywords if you want because you know, whatever, a cloud, whatever, to help you better know what it does. But again, with the way it's so easy to see previews, I don't think a lot of this is necessary. And where you want to save it, I want to save it in my collection. You create a new collection right here too, if you so choose. And we're going to click OK. And we go up to my collection. You're going to see that I have an ugly preset and I have Tony's Photo Pop. That's the one I just did, like that. And there it is. All right, now that is pretty much how snapshots work, how presets work, and what you do over here with the collections in the left-hand panel. I'm going to hit that arrow there to give me a little more working space so you could better see what I'm doing over here on the right-hand panel. And what we have is three major tabs: global adjustments, local adjustments, and finishing touches. I usually do them directly in order. And as I mentioned, I will go in and I will pick a preset. In this case, it was Photopop, although I did adjust it a little bit and I ended up calling it Tony's Photopop, and we have this adjustment right here. Then what I will do is I will come in here and I will go right from top to bottom and I'll go in Global Adjustments and we have some sub-tabs here, and I again will do these from top to bottom. Adaptive Exposure. This is kind of like an exposure control on steroids, and adaptive exposure and regions and contrast all work together. So let me just try to show it this way. I'm going to turn adaptive exposure all the way down. And as I move regions around, you can see very little is happening to the image, if anything. Same thing with contrast. If I turn contrast all the way down, all the way up, I don't see anything happening to the image. Now, brightness is independent. It's like a normal brightness control. We could just really increase brightness, decrease brightness with that control. And we'll get to these last two sliders in a second. Let me better explain what adaptive exposure and regions do. As you turn adaptive exposure up, if you have regions on one, it's considering the image as one huge region. And adaptive exposure is applying an algorithm to the image and kind of applying exposure and contrast at the same time to this entire image because I have regions set to 1. So I have one region. Similarly, when we start messing with contrast and we turn it down, it's doing it to the whole image, as you could see, because I have regions set to 1. Now, when we start increasing regions, we're dividing the image up into smaller sections. So now we're applying this exposure contrast blend independently on each of these small sections. Right now I have 13 dialed in. Now, one thing, as you could see, the more regions you have, the more it starts looking like it's HDR toned. Because, as you could see, we have smaller regions. The adaptive exposure is applying itself independently to all these regions, and the contrast is being applied independently to all those different regions. So it really could get some crazy looks to your image. So how should you adjust them? What I would suggest you do, and what I do, is I will usually put regions first, and I usually keep regions between 4 and like 16, less than 20, definitely, but usually between 4 and 4 and 10. And then I will push adaptive exposure up a little, and I will see what it looks like. Then maybe I'll just click on regions a touch, back and forth, and to get it kind of where I like it. Then I'll mess with exposure again. And then what I do is I go on one side of the slider and click to bring, in this case, the slider down. I'll go on the other side and bring it up, then bring it up a little more, and that's what I'll do. And I'll just play this little dance with these two sliders until I get it kind of, looking the way I envision it to look. Then I go down to contrast and I'll do the same thing. I'll click it down, click it up, click it down, click it up. More often than not, I just double click on the name to reset it to where it was, because adjusting those two sliders pretty much got it to where I like it. Brightness I almost never have to adjust because I usually set the brightness the way I wanted it before I sent the image to Topaz. Only now and then, sometimes adaptive exposure might make something a little too dark and I might mess around with brightness, but I can't remember the last time I really messed with that slider at all. Now, protect highlights and protect shadows. Maybe after I adjusted these, I started to clip the highlights or I started to clip the shadows. So you could protect them by moving these sliders around. As I move protect highlights to the right, you'll see that the right side of the histogram will move to the left. So I'm making the highlights darker. As you can see, the bright parts are getting uh, darker. So if you're clipping, you could protect your highlights with that. And similarly with the shadows, if I move that to the right, the left side of the histogram will move to the right. So I'm making the shadows less black, pretty much. So again, I will just do those, usually if I'm clipping. Sometimes if I have parts that are really dark, I might open them up a little bit. I might mess around with those, but not too often, to tell you the truth. Now, if you want to turn all this off just to see what it looks like, you could hit this little checkbox here, and anything that's under adaptive exposure got turned off. Okay, so that's what that checkbox does. So again, that's how I will adjust these. I will just come in and bounce them around a little bit to get it to look like something I like. The next thing I'll do is I go to the next sub-tab called Details. This is just pretty much the detail in it, and it gives you kind of mid-tone contrast and a sharpening effect to the image. And again, I will just kind of bounce these sliders around to get it to something I like. And if I get to something like this that I totally despise, I'll just immediately go the other way. All right? You could bring strength way down and get this kind of real soft look effect if you so choose. Um, so we're going to get a little detail, let's say, right around there. Now it's a little bit too much detail for my liking, but you'll see something in a minute. I'm doing that on purpose. Boost will really bring out some of the micro contrast, but it will also enhance any noise that happens to be in the image. So I would be very careful with what you do with boost. And, you know, just be very aware of the adjustment throughout the whole image and make sure you're not really enhancing noise a lot. Threshold um, is a real subtle adjustment, and what it will do is actually the higher these two sliders are, the more threshold will look like it's doing anything to the image. So usually I don't adjust these two sliders so much that threshold makes a difference, so I'm not really worried about it. Radius will control it. This image isn't as good for me to demonstrate what radius will do. But as you turn it all the way down, anything that's really fine detail won't be as detailed. As you turn it up, you'll see more detail throughout the image, I guess. So we're going to leave that like right around there. And sharpening, it's just like a typical sharpening control. You could sharpen the image. You can see it really is powerful, but again, it will really sharpen noise also. Now, I adjusted these a little bit strong for my taste, but when I check this box here, it says process details independently. What that means is all these adjustments are being, once I check it, are being processed independently of adaptive exposure. And I've noticed that it softens everything a little bit, as you could see. And I often will check that. I will overdo these boxes and then check that, and I kind of like the effect usually. So that's me. So I would say experiment with your image and see how you like it. Now, color. This is like saturation throughout the image. And again, this works very similar to the adaptive exposure. We have adaptive saturation and we have these color regions. If I have the region on 1, it's looking at the entire image as one region. And we're turning saturation up, and you can see it gently increase saturation across the entire image. But if we get more regions and we start turning saturation up, you can see how it's adjusting the saturation differently over here than it may be over in here. It's because we're adding these additional regions. So again, I would use these two sliders sparingly. Tell you the truth, I usually don't move them much off whatever my preset was. So I added that preset. I came over here and I'm doing some touch-ups. I usually don't do much with these two. Saturation is like a normal saturation slider. It just will adjust saturation in the entire image, so I can make the image monochrome by going all the way to the left, or like ridiculously high saturated to the right. The default position is 1.00. I usually just leave it right there. Saturation boost is almost exactly like vibrance in Lightroom. Any color that isn't already saturated, it will get boosted when you push this slider to the right. And I don't really mess with that one too much either. Hue, you could just change the colors. So if you want to get a purple sky and green sky, whatever, you could just mess around with the hue and really change the colors of the image. But I never do that either. So that is the color tab or sub-tab under global adjustments. Noise. I usually don't do either of these. And the reason being is there's a little checkbox here, use Topaz denoise. When I check that, when I save this image, it will get us the technology from Topaz denoise will be applied to the image and noise will be reduced. So that's what I usually do. If you don't have Topaz denoise, what you could do is you could move these to the right. What I would do is zoom in to 100% at least and look at the image. Maybe zoom in even further and look for the noise and change your suppression a bit to it looks like it really soften the noise, and then move your amount around, and do this all the time while looking at your detail, and make sure that you're not losing any detail anywhere in the image. So keep that in mind. Now if you want to move around the image, you would go over to navigate, and you can see right here we have this little square, and we could move this square around and see a different part of the image like that. Or if you prefer, you could go to this loop view, and then you could just click on different parts of the image and it will show up in this loop. I prefer navigate, and I look on the big image as opposed to looking on the smaller image. But usually I just keep the histogram open and I will click Topaz denoise. Now be aware that if you do click that, processing will take longer. So it will take longer to process if you do click this checkbox for using Topaz denoise. Now the next is a curve tool, and it's just like curves in Photoshop or the tone curve in Lightroom, specifically the point curve in Lightroom. And you can see we have just a typical tone curve, and we could dial in some medium contrast. It has some presets. We can make a negative picture if we so choose, strong contrast. Usually I just use medium contrast like that. You could add your own points like that. Just click on it and move things around like that. You don't like what you did, click reset, and you can come back up here and add medium contrast like that. And that's the tone curve. Works just like every other tone curve you probably used. So that's global adjustments. Next, local adjustments. Now, there's 4 different things you could do here. You could dodge and burn a specific part of the image, and I'll demonstrate that in a minute. You could smooth out a part of an image, and that kind of means blur it in a way. So if you have, let's say, a portrait and you want to blur the background a little bit, you would use smooth. And another thing is you could brush away this effect. So if I applied this effect and I don't like it over the sky, let's say, I could brush it away. Now, the way to do that, I click on here, and we have four sliders. Of course, we have brush size, and you can see how it increases as we move to the right. We have the opacity. Maybe I don't want to brush away 100% of the effect. I want to just brush away half of it, like so it's applied slightly. The hardness of the brush, you could go all the way to the left is a very soft brush, all the way to the right is a very hard brush, and edge aware. And I'm going to demonstrate that first. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn opacity all the way up, and I'm going to turn edge aware all the way down, and I am going to get a rather big brush and make it relatively hard. And I'm going to go over here, and I'm just going to go right across the top of the building in the sky. And you can see it took away the effect. Hopefully you can see in the video. It took away the effect on the building and the sky. And you can see in the mask how it just put this comet-looking paint trail right here. So that is with edge aware all the way at 0. So we're going to reset that. So we're back to where we were. And by the way, you can just do that by hitting these buttons up here. Now I'm going to turn edge aware all the way up. Now all I got to do is make sure that the crosshair of the brush doesn't touch the building, and it will take the effect away from the building, but not from the sky, I'm sorry, but not from the building. And hopefully you could see the outline of the building right here. It did a fairly good job. Now this is a really busy image. Hopefully your image isn't as busy as this. You have a little more cut and dry building, let's say, and you just want to take it away from the building and leave it on the sky, or vice versa. You would use this brush out tool and do it. You also then could erase if you went and you did it in a spot you didn't like. You could come back in here and erase it, uh, what you just did, and you can see how I'm basically painting black on the mask when I'm using the eraser. Now, let's reset that. Now, I mentioned you could dodge and burn, so let's click dodge. Let's have it on edge aware, relatively hard brush, and we're going to do the building here. So I am dodging the building, and as you could see, it didn't dodge the sky. As long as that crosshair doesn't go into the sky, I didn't dodge the sky, and I did a really very good job. It did a nice job of just dodging the building. And similarly with burn, we could burn the building like that. Now, it's making it very dark, and that's because I have opacity all the way up. So just that's kind of like the strength control. So let me reset that, and let's turn opacity down. And this is typically how you would use dodge and burn. You would keep your opacity relatively low, and you would just do a subtle dodge and burn like this. And it's cumulative. Now you could see it here, and I could go it a second time, and you can see how it's burning a little darker. It's making the mask a little lighter. I could do it a third time. And that is more often how you would dodge and burn. You would keep opacity relatively low. Okay, so that is, in a nutshell, these tools here. Now remember, you could do smooth. You could kind of blur out a background a little bit. Let me try to show that. Let's turn opacity up. And you can see how it's kind of blurred those clouds out a little bit there. So let me show it again. There's before and there's after. So you could see how it kind of blurred those out. So that would be the smooth tool if you so choose to ever use that. So again, um, you know, I think they're very powerful, and be aware of how you use edge aware and you'll do fine. So that's local adjustment. Now finishing touches, there's a lot of different things you could do here, and to tell you the truth, I don't do a lot of them. There's diffusion. You again could soften the entire image by moving these sliders around like this. You could, just again, what I would suggest you do is you kind of click around and see if it's giving you a look that you like, and go from there. Transition is going to be the part that is you made softer to the part that's not as soft, so it's going to be less of an effect when you're towards the left and more of an effect to the right generally. Again, we could just move around. If you don't like anything you did, you could just double click on the name and it will bring it back to its default position. As you can see, it's very soft and I don't like it, so I'm just going to turn it off by hitting that checkbox right there. So that's diffusion. Grain, you could add like a color grain to the image. And I'll show you, just turn that way up and you could see, and you could make it more noticeable with adding more contrast, and you could make it larger by moving that slider to the right. Again, I don't usually do that either. Transparency, this is similar to layers in Photoshop, and we talked about this in previous um, video where we did, I believe it was Topaz Impression, where it's as though you had the original image as the bottom layer and the top layer was our processed image. And you could decrease the transparency of our processed image so more of the original image is bleeding through. This would come in great that if you applied some adjustments and it's just a little too strong, go to transparency and move this slider to the right, all the way to the right, and you're pretty much getting your original image. All the way to the left and it's turned off. You have a solid layer, so you're not letting any of the original image come through. Warmth I often use. If you move it to the left, you get cooler, and if you move it to the right, you get a little warmer. And it's pretty powerful, so you usually don't have to move it too much. And I'll warm this image up a tiny bit like that. So that's warmth. Border, uh, just like this. You could get a border like that, and you could pick a color of your border by hitting that button there and click OK. So that's by, again, it's that button right there. Or if I want to pick a color from the image, so I'll click this button here, and then when I come over the image, I have this little eyedropper, and I could come in and pick a color, like right there, and that would be the color of my border. I personally never use borders, but maybe you do. Vignette, I often use Vignette, but to tell you the truth, I will use the Vignette in Photoshop or Lightroom. I don't often apply the Vignette here, but let me try to show you. If I move to the right, I'll get a white vignette, and if I move to the left, I get a black vignette. And as you can see, this is the size of the vignette when I move this slider that says vignette size appropriately. And the vignette transition is how soft is it. Now, as you can see, when it's all the way to the left, it's very strong, very abrupt. If I move to the right, it's very soft. So it's kind of like the softness of the vignette. Now curvature is when it's all the way to the left. It's an oval in this case because my image happens to be a rectangle. If it was a square image, this would be a circle. I go all the way to the right and I'm going to have a rectangle. If this was a square image, I'd have a square. So that is the curvature of the vignette. So typically, as I mentioned, I don't use this too much. Here, I will apply a vignette in Photoshop or in Lightroom, but we'll leave it on for now. So right there. And tone. Now this is the one that like trips most people up. Don't really know what it does, but tell you the truth, I've never seen a great explanation for it, and I don't think the Topaz Adjust 5 user manual gives a great explanation for it. What we do is we have these 4 regions, and what you're doing is you're going to pick a color for a region, and then you're going to be moving the slider, and you're actually moving the entire color palette, and you're shifting it, and you're applying this color to that area in the image that represents that color where the slider is, which like makes no sense because you really don't know where you are. You're just arbitrarily moving the slider around, and this black is being applied various places on the image. So what you could do is you could get some kind of toning here. So you could go in and like, I don't know, pick something like that. And then you could move the slider around and it will tone the image, give it these purpley tones if you so choose. Again, then another region, you could get a different color and you can move and blend these tones together as you move around. And really, I confess I've never ever in my life used this. So you could experiment with it and maybe you could tone an image the way you'd like. I am going to investigate this further and see if there's anything neat that we could do, like this cross-processing is popular, that I showed people how to do that in Lightroom, how you could get a cross-process look or get an Instagram look and stuff like that. I've showed people how to do that in Lightroom. You do that with this tone section of finishing touches, but to tell you the truth, it's very difficult to do. It's much easier, in my opinion, to do it in Lightroom or Photoshop. So I usually never mess with that, so I'm going to leave that off. So that is the actual, all the adjustments in Topaz Adjust 5. So we're done with the image. I want to hit OK. So we're going to hit OK. And it's going to save this, and it's going to actually be applied to that top layer, this layer that I created. So if I turn it off, you can see there's the original background layer, and there is my Topaz adjusted layer. Now I'm going to quickly do one more just to show you a portrait. And I got this kind of goofy guy here. So we're going to duplicate the image, hit Command J. We're going to go up to Filter, Topaz Lab, Topaz Adjust 5. It's going to open the image again in Topaz Adjust 5, and it's going to apply the settings I just did to that boat image. You can see I have a vignette here and stuff like that. And I don't want that, so I'm going to hit Reset. So we're now back to the original image. Now I'm going to show you how I would typically do this. I'm usually very quick in and out of any plugin, especially Adjust 5. I know for portraits, I like a specific one. I go up to Adjust For, and I go down to Portrait Drama. And you can see that look. This is kind of this grunge look that's really popular. But sometimes it's not strong enough. So what I'll do then is I close that down, and I go over to Global Adjustments, and I will increase the regions a little bit, like that. And I just click around till I get it that look I want. And then I take away some of the contrast too. Like, see that look? You guys, I'm sure that have watched a lot of photography. You could do this in Photoshop. It takes about 20 steps. It's a lot easier to come in here and do it. And that's the adaptive exposure I normally will do. Nothing much more there. Uh, let's see. I might go into detail, and I'll mess around with the see, I could really give it this crazed look like that. Now, I'm sure you guys have seen, I know there's a guy who sells access to a bunch of training videos where he shows you how to do this look in Photoshop. And his videos are like 2 hours long because there's a lot of steps. It's a lot faster to do it right here in Topaz Adjust 5. So this is what I would do. So then I'm done pretty much. I did adaptive exposure and details. And what I didn't touch on, and I want to touch on it now, I do like this. So I'm going to hit apply. Okay, now what that did is it applied it to my image. But I'm going to stay in Topaz. I'm not leaving Topaz. Now my original image is this image that I just adjusted. This is a way you could add preset on top of preset. Meaning, I could go now back and I want to add a simplify preset on top of this, or maybe a recovery shadow preset on top of this. So I'll click on that. Now I added the preset on top of this preset. So that's how you could, or on top of my adjustments. To be more clear, I'm sorry, is I did a preset and I did some adjustments to that preset. I hit apply. Now that becomes my original image. Now I'm adding presets on top of my original image. That's how you could add more than one preset on something. You could just add a preset, hit apply, add another preset, hit apply, add another preset, hit apply. That means you added 3 presets, all one on top of the other. Now this, crazy look here is I used Neutralizer by Jorge Diaz. It's kind of a cool look. So let's say I want that. So I'm just going to click OK. So I hope that was clear how you could add multiple presets one on top of the other. Because typically what you would do is when you click on a preset and then click on another preset and click on another preset, you're just replacing each preset with the next one. So this is how you could apply one on top of the other and get a really, really ugly picture like that. So that's it for Topaz Adjust 5. If you stayed with me this long throughout my boring diatribe, I thank you very, very much. I really do appreciate it. Thank you. I hope this was all clear. I know especially towards the end, I think I was getting tired and I wasn't being as nuanced as I should have with all the different adjustments. If you guys have any questions, feel free to ask. And I again thank you everyone that has subscribed to my YouTube channel that watches my videos. I really do appreciate it. All right, I'll talk to you guys soon.